Imagine a war that lasted 4 years, killed more than 20,000 people, and was completely erased from Brazil's official history. It wasn't a conflict between nations. It was waged inside the country itself, against its own people. And what made it even more disturbing is that at the center of it all, there was a man that survivors swore could not be killed. This is not legend. This happened. The year is 1912. Southern Brazil still carries open wounds. The region known as the Contestado, a strip of land disputed between the states of Paraná and Santa Catarina, exists in a kind of legal limbo. No one is quite sure who it belongs to, and when no one knows who the land belongs to, the powerful simply take it. But the story you're about to hear doesn't begin with politicians, landowners, or generals. It begins with a monk. A thin man with deep-set eyes and a quiet voice walking through the southern backlands preaching a simple message: the land belongs to those who work it. His name was José Maria, and within a few years he would become the spark that ignited one of the largest peasant revolts in the history of the Americas. To understand the Contestado, you need to understand what was done to those people. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, the Brazilian government granted a massive stretch of land to a foreign railroad company, the Brazil Railway Company, controlled by American magnate Percival Farquhar. The mission was simple: build a railway connecting Rio Grande do Sul to São Paulo. The problem? Tens of thousands of people already lived on that land. Caboclos, mixed-race descendants of indigenous peoples and poor whites, people who had no property deed because they had never needed a piece of paper to know that land was theirs. They had lived there for generations, farming, hunting, praying, burying their dead in that same soil. And then, suddenly, they received a notice. They had to leave. There was no fair compensation. There was nowhere to go. And to make matters worse, the railroad brought something that would destroy what remained of the local economy: industrial logging of the Araucaria forests. Within just a few years, the timber companies tied to Brazil Railway had leveled nearly everything. What wasn't sold was burned. A landscape that took centuries to form, destroyed in less than a decade. It's into this landscape of despair that José Maria arrives. He didn't come preaching revolution. He came preaching faith, healing, hope. He claimed to be a disciple of the monk José Maria, an almost mythical figure who decades earlier had walked the same backcountry, promising divine protection to the poor and damnation to their oppressors. The people believed him, and why wouldn't they? When everything you had was taken from you, when the very state that was supposed to protect you was the same one that sent soldiers to drive you from your home, faith becomes the last territory no one can seize. José Maria healed the sick, prayed over the dead, distributed herbal remedies, and around him the redutos began to form, entire landless communities living under their own order outside the reach of the Brazilian state. And then something happened that changed everything. In October of 1912, in a small battle at Irani, minor, almost symbolic in military terms, José Maria was killed. But the caboclos refused to believe it, or rather they believed in something far more powerful. They began to say that he had passed into the beyond and that he would return, that he now led an enchanted, invisible army marching through the fields at night, that those who died fighting alongside the redutos didn't truly die, they simply crossed over to join the monk's army on the other side. You might call this mass delusion, or you might call it by its real name, resistance. Over the next 2 years, the Contestado redutos grew in ways no one had anticipated. At the height of the movement, an estimated 50,000 people lived inside these autonomous communities, outside the control of the state. They had their own leaders, their own systems for distributing food, their own religious rituals, blending Catholicism with indigenous and African beliefs, and they had warriors.
The pares de França, as the fighters were known, genuinely believed that their prayers made them impervious to bullets. They wore white, they carried crucifixes, and they walked toward the enemy with a conviction that terrified regular army soldiers, not because they were fanatics, but because they had nothing left to lose. The Brazilian government panicked. At first, they sent a small number of troops. Those troops were defeated. They sent more, defeated again. The terrain was brutal, thick forest, steep ridges, rivers cutting across every route. The caboclos knew every trail, every trap, every blind spot. But in 1914, everything changed. Brazil mobilized the largest military force it had assembled since the Paraguayan War. Artillery, machine guns, reconnaissance aircraft, one of the first military uses of airplanes in South America. And this time, the objective wasn't just to win battles, it was to annihilate. General Fernando Setembrino de Carvalho coordinated a strategy of total siege. Redutos were blockaded, roads were cut off, food supplies were severed, families trying to flee were detained, those who resisted were killed on the spot. And then the massacre began. The Reduto of Santa Maria was the last great stronghold. By early 1915, it was surrounded on all sides. Inside, men, women, and children waited for the miracle that José Maria had promised. The miracle never came. The troops moved in. What happened in the weeks that followed is still difficult to reconstruct with precision because the archives were destroyed, the survivors were scattered, and the Brazilian government made sure the story was never told. Estimates put the death toll between 8,000 and 20,000. Many of them didn't die in battle. They died of hunger, disease, or summary execution, children included. Entire villages were burned with their inhabitants still inside. And when it was over, the Contestado was simply silenced. No national monument, no holiday. For decades, there wasn't even a museum dedicated to the conflict, as if those people had never existed, as if that war had never happened. But the land holds what people try to erase. Even today, in small towns across the interior of Santa Catarina, you'll find elderly men and women who carry stories passed down through generations. Stories of grandparents who saw the Redutos, who knew someone who touched the robes of José Maria. And in some of those stories, he still hasn't returned. He merely departed to prepare the way. What happened in the Contestado was not just a war, it was a mirror showing a Brazil we never wanted to see. A country that used the language of progress to destroy everyone who got in the way of progress, that wielded the law as a weapon against those who had never been granted access to the law, that called them fanatics when all they were calling for was justice, when all they wanted was their land back. The railroad that cost so many lives still runs today, cutting through the same ground soaked in blood, and the descendants of the Contestado caboclos still live in that region, many of them to this day without land of their own. Some wars never end. They just stop making noise.